Hi, everybody. Dave Whitmarsh here from Whitmarsh Consulting Group, one of the best practice in HR talent acquisition, training, leadership, and coaching sites. And just we're going to do this webcast. We had some technical issues on the virtual event, so we decided to do it again live rather than spending the time. We might as well invite some new audience in. So John Younger here is the founder of a company called Recruitershare, and really has come up with a very unique alternative, a bit of a disrupting force in the recruiting space. And looking forward to hearing this. And always welcome anybody if they have any questions or concerns or anything at all. They can certainly put it in the chat function or the Q&A. If you have any detailed questions, just let me know and I can actually promote you into talking mode so we can get the full meaning of your question instead of maybe a typed version. But so without any further issues here, I'm just going to kick you over to John, and here we go.
Thank you, David. Yes, I'm so excited to be here. I love what you do and the educational series that you have, and thanks for inviting me on. It's probably worthy of note a few elements of my background. In the vein of full disclosure, I'm a recovering software developer. And in another lifetime, I actually developed an applicant tracking system from scratch for Bank of America. They ended up using it for approximately 8 years. And they liked it so much, they pulled me into HR, where I started to help recruit technical folks. And within about 18 months, I ended up managing all the staffing and recruiting for 2 divisions of about 16,000 employees. I share that with you because I've been on all sides of this equation, including the belly of the beast of a large HR function. After that, I had a consulting company, a recruiting agency. I started a recruitment process outsourcing company called Acolo, had and still have a HR tech company, a hiring automation platform called Hire Mojo, and ultimately started Recruitershare about a year ago. And what I'm going to share with you today are some tricks that recruiters use to find people, and also how to navigate it when you don't have enough need for a full-time recruiter, or you have enough need, but there are so many disciplines, there's no way one recruiter could do it. Throughout all of this, with my businesses and with Bank of America and other companies, there has been a high level of frustration with the actual process of engaging recruiters, and also which technologies to use. So what I did, if you're familiar with the concept of root cause analysis, I stepped back and I asked some basic questions. And one of those questions is, why are people hired? Why are people fired? And this is an important baseline question to ask for all of us, because it's really clear to me now that people are hired because they have a skill, and they're oftentimes fired because they're not a fit. So why is that important? Well, that means that for all these job descriptions and all these recruitment efforts and all these recruiters looking for 8 years of experience in Java or AngularJS or marketing, you'll hire the person with 8 years of experience, but you'll let them go because they're just not a fit with your team. They're not producing, they don't communicate in a way that's consistent, they aren't motivated enough, their ethos doesn't fit. So with that, I actually looked at this across an organization. Of course, you get more managers, and this gets even harder, right? Because now your marketing manager needs somebody, once a year. Your salesperson needs 3 people right now. Your tech person needs 1 person. And it was just really difficult to get recruiters, internal or external, who I could consistently rely upon. So what I'm going to share with you, whether you use an internal recruiter, external, the 4 what I call magic questions. many of you who have jobs that you've needed to fill probably can relate to this, that you get this job description and it says, I need 8 years of experience in Java. What are you going to do? You're going to program in Java. Okay, well, they already know that. So here are the 4 questions that should always be asked of every job, regardless of who's going to be supporting the filling of it, whether it's yourself, whether it's an outside agency, whether it's your internal recruiter. And here are the 4 questions. What needs to get done by when? This sounds kind of simple, but at the end of the day, what I found was, I need somebody with 8 years of experience would be the answer. It's like, okay, I get that. Why? What needs to actually get done? And I've seen hundreds of jobs, maybe more personally, where when asked this question, the manager will scratch her head and say, well, actually, we have a need to do 3 big releases a year, and we need someone who can facilitate the QA for each release so that it's going to be released without issue, or they're going to be doing X number of marketing campaigns. That's a tremendously valuable piece of information, because it moves beyond the generic what a marketing manager does and to the specific about what we need done. The second question is, how will this person's success be quantitatively measured? Again, finding that most managers, well, I'll know it when I see it. It's like, no, you won't know it when you see it. And it goes back to SMART objectives, really: specific, measurable, aligned, realistic, and time-bound. The reason you want to know how success is going to be measured right at the forefront is it's going to determine how you're going to find and select the person. So, for example, I need a marketing manager. Well, marketing is the kind of a field where you can have a broad swath of talent, experience, and ability to deliver. So, for example, if we're marketing a platform that's going to consumer, then the success measurement might be they need to get by 3 months after being hired, they have to get an average of 100 marketing qualified leads, 50 sales qualified leads, and 22 new deals per month. Well, now find somebody who's already done that, and you're taking away a lot of the guesswork. Third question is, why would they love working with you? And again, a lot of the times we hear, we are a great company. That's terrific, but they're actually going to be working with David as the manager and his team. Again, one of the largest reasons people leave their role is because they have a conflict with their manager, not the company. The last thing is, what are the common things about your top performers? Hard skills, soft skills. I'll give you an example. In one organization, as a financial services company, they were looking for a financial analyst. The job had been open quite a long time without success of finding someone. And we stepped in and went through these questions and found out the exact kinds of financial analytics they needed to be able to do, the stock analysis, the evaluating companies and their economic foundation. But the biggest thing, and this is going to sound ridiculous, the biggest thing was that they had a ping pong table in the middle of their office, and every week they hired, and he came into the office, a professional ping pong coach. So literally they would all take a break on Friday afternoon, spend time with this coach and play ping pong and have a blast. It was like their big thing. Had nothing to do with being a financial analyst, had everything to do with being a fit. So what the recruiter did in this case was recrafted the job, and you're going to laugh, but the title of the job was actually financial analyst who loves ping pong, which sounds ridiculous. You'd never see that in a usual job description or title. And what happened was this went out into the ether, and I'll show you some techniques for doing that. And it got bounced around as a viral marketing job description. And ultimately, a friend of this particular analyst they hired forwarded to the analyst, and the analyst said, I'm working, I'm not really looking, I'm reasonably happy where I am, but he loved ping pong. So he's like, all right, I'll bite. And so one of the interview questions was actually around ping pong, one of the initial screening questions. Long story short is 2 weeks after they launched that, they made an offer to this guy. But it wasn't because he'd had X number of years of being a financial analyst. It was because he fit. So I'm going to switch gears again. And there's a simple truth when it comes to getting outside recruiting help or inside. And it's the better hires come from proven recruiters with the best tools. And some of those tools, by way of example, are those first 4 questions that were asked. Does the recruiter understand how to ask them and hear the answer? Does that recruiter have the framework technically to be able to capture this and craft questions that are really going to help determine those with the talent and the fit and those that don't? And most recruiters don't have those kinds of tools. They'll use a LinkedIn, they'll use a few other things, but in the absence of a little more thoughtful process, it gets much more difficult to fill jobs consistently. In the end, what we all want is to get to these high-rated, proven recruiters. So if you have a job that needs outside support, you have a couple broad brush options for that. So let's go over a couple of those real quick. One, it's not so easy to pick one. The first one I want to bring up is retained search. And retained search is ultimately probably the most high-touch way of recruiting. These are recruiters and executives who know how to ask those 4 questions. They're going to be a little more thoughtful up front. The retained search firm won't just take your job description that you toss over and then run with it. That's not how they work. They want to understand a little bit more about how this person that they're seeking needs to be in the world, what they need to have done, how the fit will be. They're going to be more thoughtful. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that executive retained search firms have really fancy offices. Why? Because they charge you a lot of money. And it really wouldn't scale to jobs that are not really rare and executive retained. That's what I found. I also found that most of the time you don't need the executive retained search firm to use an executive retained search-like practice or search or effort. The next one I want to talk about is contingency search. This is spaghetti and wall. So contingency search works like this. David gives me an opening for a marketing manager, and the first person or first company to throw the candidate up against the wall that sticks wins. I'm not going to worry about the job detail. I'm not going to worry about the tight fit with the candidate. I'm going to turn around and as fast as possible, contingency search firms throw people against the wall. And you know what? 17, 18% of the time they stick, which means 80, 82% of the time they're wasting their time. Now, the other thing that's important about contingency search is that if the job is hard and requires more time, they're not going to spend time on your job. Why? Because they don't know if you've got it out to 5 other contingency search firms, which means instead of being, 20% probability of fill or 18, it goes down to 12%. It's a hard job. Good luck, David. Yeah, I'm working on it. I say in quotes, but unless somebody just lands right in my lap, you're not going to see great candidates from contingency search firms reliably. It's also really expensive. The last thing around contingency search is many companies get it out to more than one. So now you as the manager have to do the work of the recruiter, because these recruiters are going to throw resumes at you as hard and fast as they can. So that leaves it upon you to do all the initial screening, to do the management of the process. They're not necessarily going to help with coordinating interviews and driving it to close. They might with some they won't, but now you're having to deal with a lot of stuff coming through email. It's messy. And the last one I want to focus on categorically are what I call aggregators, or sort of as you might need recruiters. So for example, Upwork, Bounty Jobs, and LinkedIn, you can get recruiters through all 3 of those. But just the process of finding and selecting a recruiter might take weeks. I've tried it, and the reviews are all good. Bounty Jobs is basically the contingency search spaghetti on the wall amplified. So now you're going to get more, generally not the best recruiters, because the best recruiters won't work contingency. They don't need to. They have a lot of work and they don't have to work that way. So not that there aren't some great contingency recruiters, and there might be some on this call, but at the end of the day, if you're a contingency recruiter, you don't have to work for free, which is basically what the company's asking you to do. And if you're a company that has a job to fill, you're going to want dedicated sourcing effort committed to helping you fill your job. This is also expensive. It's still 15 to 25%. So I came to this conclusion that there has to be a better way. And that's really what led me to really think about what it is that makes recruiters consistently produce. The recruiter, not just the agency. And by the way, one last thing about the agencies, contingency and retained, is oftentimes the person you're working with isn't the person doing the work. So there's oftentimes a team or a few people who are much, much more junior, or even worse, offshore, trying to find your next superstar, and they have no idea what they're looking for other than keywords on resumes. So asking the 4 questions was an essential piece, more common with retained search than any others, but that's a piece that I wanted to have retained, or I wanted to have included. So now let's say you want to try this yourself. Well, I'm going to give you 3 recruiter tricks that will allow you to do this yourself. The first one is lose the job description. What do I mean by that? Take a look at job descriptions. With rare exception, most of them are, if you're a financial analyst, what are you going to do? You're going to be a financial analyst. If you're going to be a marketing manager, what are you going to do? You're going to be a marketing manager. But they already know that. You don't have to explain the person in the role what the role is, because they already do it. You have to explain to them why they care. Now, David, this is politically incorrect, so you may need to splice this out if you think it's too edgy. But I actually believe the job description and this whole process is more like dating than it is hiring. What do I mean by that? Imagine if you met somebody and you said, you must be this tall, you must have this much income, it would be nice if you drove this kind of car. You turn and run the other direction, right? If someone came up to you and approached you that way. And that's how most job descriptions are written. However, if you came up to someone and said, start talking about moonlight serenades and fine Chardonnays, it's a totally different experience. So the trick,
John, I am going to interject and say I'm a little disappointed. I expected something a little worse from you.
Well, good. So I've set the bar sufficiently low that I haven't crossed it. I appreciate that. Good. So what's interesting about this is when you shift from writing an announcement to the world to a personal love letter to the person. You're writing this to your person you're going to hire. You just don't know him or her yet. It actually ignites, or has the probability to ignite, a micro-viral campaign. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. So the second trick, and this is me, and I'm a math geek, computer science geek, and statistics were always fun for me. What I find in the HR and recruiting industries, including contingency search and retained search in-house, is that most recruiters and most organizations will focus only on 1 or 2 channels. I'm going to find them on LinkedIn. The person I'm looking for won't be looking, is what I get. There's no way the person I'm looking for will respond to an outbound, posting. The list is long. They have to be in your existing database. You have to have, and there are seeds of truth to those, but statistically speaking, that's wildly inaccurate. So I would ask my recruiters, where specifically of all the applicants and hires come from for the marketing jobs that we've filled over the last several years? Well, I think they're coming from LinkedIn. I don't care what you think. Where quantitatively have they been coming from? And I was unable to find a single recruiter or recruiting agency who could answer that question quantitatively. Think about that. So market the job aggressively. Put it out on LinkedIn. Put it on Craigslist. Go ahead and do the direct sourcing. Find people on Indeed. Get it out to your employees. Push it out to your Twitter and Facebook. So you imagine now you have this love letter, not a job description, and now you're letting it bounce around the universe across multiple channels. So I'll give you an example. A CIO job for Carl Icahn was available. I don't know if you know Carl Icahn. He's a Gates level billionaire. Lives in Manhattan. He was looking for a chief information officer. And he was ready to pay $160,000 to an executive retained search firm, about a $500,000 comp program. And we said, try this. His words, not mine. There's no way in hell this will work by putting anything online, and it's unlikely you'll find somebody if you're not already playing golf with them. And we realized telling Carl Icahn he's wrong is a bad career move. So we said, well, you may be right. How about try it for 2 weeks and you be the judge? Fortunately for us, he bid. Said, all right, I'll give it 2 weeks. So this love letter was all about controlling literally $1 billion budget and managing the technology initiatives across multiple companies. Now, we couldn't use his name, so we got no uplift from that. Then the job was promoted among communities, direct sourcing was done, and ultimately, the person that he hired was found, screened, and presented to him in 4 days. Now, check this out. This is the part that I find mathematically so lovely, is that the person they hired heard about this job through his neighbor. His neighbor's like, look, you got to check this job out. It looks really interesting. And the person who was hired said, I'm not looking for work. And the neighbor said, and I talked to these people, so I know firsthand. He said, no, you don't understand. This looks like a really interesting job for you, even if you're not looking. As it turns out, his neighbor heard about the job through an agent on Monster. Let me say that again. His neighbor heard about the job because he had an agent with certain words and phrases that if a job came available with those words and phrases, he would get notified. So by virtue of putting that job on Monster, it triggered his agent. He saw the job. He saw the job. He saw the love letter, not the job description, the love letter, and he immediately forwarded it to his neighbor. $160,000 was saved because that happened. It was jaw-dropping. So to think that there's only one way to do this is statistically invalid. So now the last trick that recruiters do is when they write the love letter and they market it aggressively, they craft some very specific quantitative questions with weighting and scoring. Why? Because I'll know it when I see it is a lazy person's way of maybe swerving into success. But you can literally do this with 5 to 8, maybe 12 questions. Just the first cut. But these are hard questions to craft, but the better recruiters and organizations will do this, including executive retained search. So I'll give you an example. So here's an example of a site service engineer. So this is one that was filled recently. This is a job in Houston for a company called Trelleborg. They have been trying to fill this job for months unsuccessfully. They've used a variety of agencies. This is a person who goes out, and I had never heard of Trelleborg, but you've all touched their products. These are huge bridge abutment rubber shock absorbers. These are, if you've ever gone through a tunnel, you've probably been around Trelleborg's technology. They build the panels and the balloons and the things that build big tunnels. So they need someone to go out who can manage massive gears and massive moving things and manage teams to service what's already out in the world. So in this case, again, being a math geek, here are the actual quantifiable metrics. So There were 58 people who were found. The person who was ultimately hired was found, screened, and introduced to the hiring manager in 1 day. It took 38 days for them to go through their interview process and make the offer, which was accepted. And there were 331 people who were direct sourced for this. And of those, 58 were deemed people who were applicants expressed interest. So the love letter for this one, even the creative job title was site service engineer for hands-on engineer who loves to travel. So when the recruiter profiled this job, what they realized is that this person's literally going to be on the road half the year. The way that the company had approached this previously was apologetically, sorry, but you're going to have to be on the road all the time. And what the recruiter did in getting the answer to those first 4 questions, what needs to get done by when, why will the right person want this job, how will it be quantitatively measured, and what are the attributes, it got turned around and said, you love world travel. What a great way to do world travel on our dime. This love letter went out into the world through a variety of sources. So here is for this job and this job category where all the candidates and hires have come from. Now, the thing that you'd never, ever expect is that 62 hires out of the engineering jobs that have been supported through our platform were actually filled by candidates who were found via Craigslist. I'm not here to say Craigslist is the end all. I'm here to say that there is no end all. There is no magic one source. You'll see that 62 people were direct source. That's the career network. LinkedIn jobs. There have been 29 hires for engineering jobs. So again, this highlights quantitatively where people come from. You can like it, you can hate it, you can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but at the end, this is the actual data. And here's an example of a question that is more of a marker for talent. So here is, so the question is, I have managed or been involved with the following number of projects that involve the installation, commissioning, servicing, or decommissioning of large industrial equipment, wind turbines, refineries, manufacturing facilities. Because that was so dead on with the talent this person needed to have, it was weighted in such a way that it had 20 points, which is relative to the others. But if they've done 11 or more, that meant move them up in the process, regardless of their comp level, regardless of many of the other attributes. But oftentimes, it may not be this clear on a person's resume. So those are the 3 recruiter tricks. Love letter, market it aggressively, and make sure you can quantitatively measure success on things that may not be on the resume. So David, let's get back to the core here, which is we come back to, I need a recruiter. Kind of the whole focus of this webinar. I need a recruiter to help me fill my job or 2 or 3 throughout the year. Not enough for a recruiter to hire. But right now it is chaos and pandemonium. Do I pay hourly? Do I pay contingency only? Do I have a little bit up front? Do I have an independent? Right now it's crazy. And there's nothing that really gives you consistent data to tell you have a proven recruiter. And this gets even more complicated when, oh, by the way, we need to hire recruiters, or we need to fill jobs in Germany, France, we have one in the Netherlands, and then we have the rest of the United States. It was the core of this question, combined with the recruiter tricks and the 4 attributes that really bring the consistent hiring to be more reliable and predictable, that ultimately led us to start Recruitershare. And this is, and I'll show you this briefly, again, as an alternative, and I'm happy to provide examples and other resources to people, independent of whether you work with Recruitershare. But for me, I have this bias. We live in this period of time where I expect things to happen quickly. And it's probably all Amazon's fault. I mean, I order something on Amazon and before my coffee gets cold, it's delivered to my front door. So it's like, why isn't recruiting like that? So here, what I recognize is that I wanted to get to highly rated recruiters and I want it to be quick. I don't want to pay a percentage of hire. I think that's an old school way of doing it. I want end to end. I want the recruiter to work how I want to work, and I want it transparent. This whole cloak and dagger, smoke and mirrors, we're not going to share who the brand is to the candidates, and I'm not going to share the candidate name unless you say you want them. Makes me crazy. We're living in a world that is becoming increasingly transparent. Why is recruiting still cloak and dagger? So that's why we created this thing where literally you sign in, you click fill new job, you fill in a few pieces of information. We bucket it into 4 tiers. That's it. And it's a fixed rate by tier. Pick tier 3. And here's the magic. I can choose the next best available recruiter. If I've worked with recruiters that understand me and my company and my personality and my team, pick those. I can select new recruiters. Let's say I select new recruiters, or I can even invite a recruiter who's outside of Recruitershare. The interesting thing about this is I realize the best recruiters may or may not want to work full-time for anybody. And that's why with Recruitershare, we don't bind anybody to be full-time with us. They can work as much or as little as they want. They can do anything else they want as long as it's not in conflict. So here I can see Jane Fonda. She looks pretty good, don't you think? Days to present. That's how long the average is to present the person who's ultimately hired. She's made 45 hires. She's got 4 out of 5 stars. Sounds good. And literally, I'm done. It takes 60 seconds to initiate. And what happens is the recruiters get texted, and these are recruiters in the various countries. And the rubric behind this is the industry, the department, the job level from executive to low, by tier, and the geography in Germany. Well, the person who's supporting jobs in Houston shouldn't get the invite for the German one, and vice versa. And only the highest rated recruiters are contacted. And we're seeing right now that when companies initiate this, they'll generally get the recruiter reaching out to them in 17 minutes or less. So literally before your coffee gets cold, you're going to have the recruiter reaching out to you on average. I think the shortest, David, was about 48 seconds. And the manager was like, I'm stunned. I pressed invite recruiters. Next thing I know, I get a text saying, Danielle has accepted, and then she's calling me. And the last thing I want to highlight here is that it's completely transparent. You can see the people who are applying. You can see the people who are ranked by the recruiter with the recruiter notes. I can text, email, or call the recruiter right here and say, okay, schedule Reggie and Robin to come in. They both look terrific. So that's how Recruitershare works as an alternative to all these others. It basically picks off some of the best things that make executive retained search more successful job by job, but with a speed and a responsiveness that is unlike most other options. One last thing is, and I mentioned executive retained search is 33%. Contingencies 15, if now it's bumping back up to 20, 25. If you try to hire a recruiter, if they charge you hourly, you're going to end up paying 15% all in by the time you're done, typically. And Recruitershare is a little different. We break it up by tier, and it's really simple. So you pay a little bit at launch. Why? Because we don't want to do wild goose chases with 10 other agencies with a job no one's really interested in filling. When people put a little tiny bit up front, they're more committed, and you get the one recruiter you love. And if you don't love the recruiter gets swapped out. You just say the word, because you have to love your recruiter. There's no second. If they're not producing, you shouldn't have to stick with them. And they are going to drive it, and for every hire, there's a little bit of amount. So for, in this example, $130,000 a year person in the United States, you're going to pay 8.6%. SHRM, by way of example, says the internal cost of recruiting for most organizations is between 11 and 12. So technically, Recruitershare will be less than using an internal recruiter with the LinkedIn recruiter seat and all the posting stuff and the applicant tracking system and all that stuff. And that's it. So let's open it up for questions.
Well, I'll start with one, John, and it's my own, but feel free if like I said at the beginning, if you have a question, drop it in the Q&A or the chat. You can be anonymous if you choose to be so. But one of the things that really sticks out to me in this is the expertise that's available in the network, right? And you know, you can't expect your recruiter to know every industry inside and out. And I just think that having that type of network and you've how many recruiters do you have in the back end?
So right now, Recruitershare has 50.
Right. So to be able to share some of that information and knowledge is really brilliant. And you also, this is something we should say too, that you've surpassed 50,000 hires,
Yeah, on
right?
this
And
platform, we've surpassed 50,000 hires. Now, the platform was in production before Recruitershare, but this is a battle-tested direct sourcing candidate generation and screening machine that the recruiters have access to, in addition to LinkedIn Recruiter and many other tools and other recruiters too. It's all baked into Recruitershare.
yeah, so there is a few things that a traditional smaller company or even a niche job just don't have. The industry expertise that's in there. Um, Definitely a small firm. There's no way they have full licenses for full access, and so for all the posting tools, like I said, applicant tracking. So there's a huge cost saving there. But what about something as simple as time to fill, right? Where do you think, that you come in with these 50,000 hires versus a traditional method?
The time to fill is, if you were to average all of those hires, is somewhere in the 8 to 12 days. And it's days to accept is days to fill. So, or days to present the person who will be accepting the offer. Because time to fill can be a confusing metric, because some people do it by the first time the person who was hired is introduced. Some people do it by the day that the person accepts. Some people do it, measure it by the day the person starts. So that's why we created a days to present. And days to present is the number of days between when that job goes live and when you're going to meet the person you are going to hire. Because we don't control how long it takes to coordinate all the interviews at the company, right? Somebody's on vacation, you're not sure, you have 3 other people interview. In the case of Carl Icahn, he took a couple months to run people through multiple interviews and several other, and they flew the person around to meet people. So we go by days to present, and our average days to present the person who will be hired with Recruitershare is somewhere between 8 and 9 days.
So another question then that just that I'm curious about is, so what is your what's your six? I don't even know the term. How many times have you had requisitions that you haven't fulfilled?
It's an important question. I don't know the actual number off the top of my head. I can tell you the principal reasons for not filling a job are because the spec changed and it turned into a different job, or they decided to not fill the job at all. That's the majority of it. And with Recruitershare, one of the things that we created was this idea that the recruiter owns staying on it until that job is fulfilled. And if they can't deliver, they will get a recruiter who can. So that's the slight difference here. It's hard, like Contingency Search. If it's hard, they're just not going to put any real effort. Why would they? Their chance of getting paid is de minimis, and they're getting paid nothing even to get started. So why would they spend lots of time and money on a job that's hard? Whereas this one, the reason our fill rate is so high is that they're committed. And we've also seen, and this is probably worthy of note, David, we had one sales executive who was having a really hard time finding his sales team engaged, and the recruiter went and found people, and they were dead on. And person after person, candidate, kept coming back and saying, there's no way I'm ever going to work for that person or this company. That's interesting. Well, rather than take that at face value, the recruiter and some of the other team members on Recruitershare and Hire Mojo did the forensic work and sat in on a couple of the managers, this executive's interviews. And what it turned out to be was this particular sales executive had this belief that he wanted to put people under pressure right in the interview. So he was really rude and short and, well, why do you're not good enough to work here, and just was in their face. And we asked him, why are you doing that? Because I want to see how they operate under pressure. Okay. And we highlighted to him that you're only going to see them under pressure. You won't see how they operate the rest of the time. And two, you're putting a really bad taste in every single candidate's mind after they're done talking to you, and they simply do not want to talk to you. And in fact, it was so bad, we started to do a little more research. Candidate after candidate after candidate said, oh no, my friend interviewed there. There's no way I'm going to even interview. I'm not even interested. So we fed that back to this sales executive and said, you need to stop this. You're not going to get any of the best people to work for you because you look like a jerk. And he finally got the religion. And when he finally backed down, he started making hires. But that's the kind of work that you would never or rarely get from an outside recruiting firm, except for perhaps executive retained, which this is more like executive retained for the masses.
I would have thought we would have had more questions. And so, and any parting notes or anything, John? And by the way, everybody that's on here will get access to the deck. I assume that's okay, and a link to the archive and John's contact information. So, you know, don't worry about that. But if there's no further questions, we'll leave you with a parting shot, John.
So the biggest parting message I can leave with you is, when you have a need for filling a job and you don't have a recruiter, you know, enough for a full-time recruiter, or you need help, please consider me a resource, officially or unofficially. The reality is that we've got access to tools and resources I'm delighted to share with you. Not a problem. And if you decide to use Recruitershare, great. If you decide not to, that's perfectly fine. But consider me a resource in your world and in your function. Happy to help however I can.
Hey, thank you for your time, John. And we'll be in touch. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Always nice to see some folks on the screen. So we'll have this recorded and out to you probably midday tomorrow. And have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, David. Thanks for
Thank
all
you,
your
John.
hard work too. Great job.
All right. Take care.